Hi. I had hoped this would be my last session discussing a small snippet of scripture from the book of Genesis. It is a familiar story describing the very important event of the fall of Adam and Eve. In our first session, we laid the groundwork needed for reading this story allegorically and with situational relevance to assure the importance and truth of the story for current readers as well as those hearing the story 3,000 years ago. In the second session, we discussed what is clear from the story and what is unclear at first blush, good and evil, right and wrong. In this session, I want to go further and discuss another important topic introduced by these verses, a topic that remains relevant and I believe must be considered by people of faith and atheists alike. Let's get started. What are we to make of the comment attributed to God that eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil will cause us to die? What death did our free will impose on humanity? Now, some have seen the death described as all of the brokenness and evil of the history of humanity. This perception, this view, fits with my Calvinist notion of total depravity, though I don't go so far as those who claim that without the fall caused by our free will choices, life would be completely free of disease and injury and even death. Now, some more liberal believers actually see the threat of death as a boogeyman threat to scare people into faith in God and conformance with biblical standards. This does not fit well with my Calvinist view of predestination and irresistible grace. Meanwhile, others see the death as eternal damnation, vice eternal heaven. I am ambivalent about this understanding because heaven or hell stories are not my cup of tea. There are some evidences for all these understandings in the Bible. Yet I find them too small, too insignificant, too primitive, too directive, and too hollow. So I personally have concluded this statement, "You will die," must be seen more expansively, more allegorically. And I find that Jesus' parable of the vines and the branches near the end of his ministry, recorded in John's Gospel, provides me a more expansive understanding of this much earlier story. Here again, in these verses, the situational difference between people living today and those living 3,000 years ago is important to remember. People reading or hearing the story who do not have an understanding of science cannot read or hear the same story as those who have an understanding of science. Now, science does not change the story or even its meaning. Science simply changes the way it is read or heard. The story and its meaning are timeless. The timeless meaning, for those who understand science and for those who do not, is that humanity, all of us, are subjects, slaves really, of our own self-interest. We have been since the beginning of time, any conceivable beginning of time. This story tells us clearly that this subservience to our own self-interests, while maybe logical, is self-defeating. Though we can and almost always judge the rightness of our self-interest motivated actions by intuitive or educated predictions of future benefits. These predictions, as related in this story, are always or nearly always inflated and are substantially wrong. In these verses, we are warned to turn away from self-interest and from sureness in our predictions of future benefits. We are warned to stay grounded in today. We are told to stay focused on what is good or evil now, today, this moment. This is not a command to be transactional. We should consider potential outcomes, as Jesus warns when he tells us to be discerning. Just don't bet the farm or be too sure of ourselves or future outcomes. So what was the first evil in this story? It was that Adam and Eve showed their self-interest motivations in a way that elicited a warning. Then they disobeyed God anyway. In these verses, we are told to live not to our self-interest, but to God's purpose for his creation, which is simply to care for the garden and to glorify God. We are not to live as Adam and Eve, who were driven by self-interest from the very start, but to God's purpose. Following God's loving commands is part of how we glorify God. And our trust in God's wisdom is vital for our discernment. Make sense? I want to close out our discussion of this small set of verses by discussing a final part of the message imparted here in Genesis. Doing that now will make this video uncomfortably long, and we will need a part 4, which we will take up soon. God is generous. Aloha.